This What's Working with Cam Marston podcast is brought to you courtesy of First Horizon Bank.
Hi, I'm Tabitha Scott, a human dynamics expert and the host of Bucket Listening, brought to you by First Horizon Bank. I hope you will join me as I sit down with people from all walks of life to learn how their passions, insights, and persistence have helped them turn their bucket list into a beautiful life.
Tune in on your preferred platform or visit firsthorizon.com/podcast.
Welcome to What's Working, everyone. So happy you're here along with me for this, what is going to be a very quick, rapid-fire, very thought-provoking conversation today. I'll introduce my guest to you in a moment, and I'll tell you how I met him, found out about him in a moment. Let's get into the preamble first. What's Working is the show designed to uncover workplace, workforce, and marketplace trends. My goal is always to find people who can talk about the trends in such a way that you and I can hear them, understand them, and do something about them, do something with them. And in the process of doing something with them, make each of us a little bit better at whatever it is that we do. The workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace trends that are going on, ever present, all around us. I think we can all count on healthcare being a part of nearly every trend for the future of the rest of our lives, regardless of how old we are. It's undergoing such quick change today that it's hard to get our minds around it. And where I live here in the deep south of Mobile, Alabama, our neck of the woods down here in the deep south is not often the place that leads change in healthcare. We have some modern practices, etc., but as systems, my supposition is that we're not often the ones that lead change, and we kind of follow the organizations across the country that lead the change. Doesn't mean they're not well run, doesn't mean they're not well staffed. It's just that radical change often comes from elsewhere. About 2 to 3 weeks ago, I was in the Baltimore area to give a workshop for a group of physicians and leaders at a hospital, a healthcare organization. And the day opened with the speech by the former CEO, I'm reading his bio now, of the Permanente Medical Group. Kaiser Permanente, you may have heard of them. MAPMG, the Mid-Atlantic Permanente Medical Group. His name is Robert Pearl, and I have interacted with him in the past. I wasn't aware of his role as I became aware during his speech as the leader of TPMG, the Permanente Medical Group out in Northern California, where I have been, fortunately, perhaps one of the most favorite things I do every year, a part of what they call their Decades Conference. I lead 2 workshops out there every year in the fall in the Monterey, California area. And in fact, as I speak right now, got home Sunday night for that annual visit, and it was just another remarkable visit. This man, Dr. Robert Pearl, gave the opening comments in Baltimore and really impressed me with his vision of the future of healthcare. And it wasn't long after that I found on LinkedIn an article he has written called "The AI-Empowered Patient is Coming. Are Doctors Ready?" When we get Dr. Pearl on the line here in a little while, it'll actually be a Zoom call. I'm going to ask him to make some predictions about the future of healthcare that you and I, the consumers of healthcare, will see and feel, and how artificial intelligence is going to change our consumption of healthcare. I don't think it's unreasonable for you and me to go to any of this new artificial intelligence stuff and list the symptoms that we have and expect a really good answer of our diagnosis, whatever it may be. And then go to the doctor and say, here's what ChatGPT or whatever seems to say that we have. And ChatGPT, let me remind you, is scooping up all the information it can find everywhere about stuff. So it's a well-informed reaction to your symptoms. What's the role of the doctor going to be? What's the role of artificial intelligence going to be? And what are you and I going to see in healthcare going forward? Dr. Pearl is going to give us a remarkable answer, I'm certain. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. Dr. Pearl will be on a Zoom call with me momentarily. You're going to want to listen to this one. I think we're all going to be impacted by what he's predicting, and definitely want you to stick around. So after this break, Dr. Pearl and I will get into it. I'll be right back.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit, with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. We're back from break. Dr. Robert Pearl is on the other side of a Zoom call for me. His background, as I said in the opening comments, includes CEO of the Permanente Medical Group. He's had a big role in the Mid-Atlantic Permanente Medical Group. I saw him near Baltimore a couple of weeks ago and was spellbound by the content and what it means for you and me. Dr. Pearl, you're a busy man. Thank you so much for your time. Welcome to What's Working.
Cam, it's a privilege and a pleasure to be here.
So you're in San Jose, you're in Northern California today, and you're teaching at Stanford right now. Is that correct?
That's correct. I teach both in the Stanford Medical School and the Stanford Graduate School of Business.
So your bio here is a page and a half. It's more than we can get into in the show. I'll pick and choose as we go along. I want to talk to you. Let me introduce you to my listener, Dr. Pearl, and I want you to keep him or her in your mind as we go through. He, and most are male, 75% of the audience listening are male. They are influencers in their workplace. They can hear an idea and do something. They make change in their workplace because of an idea. And I want you to keep them in mind as we talk about this, because a lot of your expertise is background in medicine, but your leadership in what you've done, particularly with MapMG, is something that I want to get into as we go along. But first, this article that I'm looking at here from LinkedIn about the AI-empowered patient is coming. Are doctors ready? Talk to me about what the patient, what my listener will experience when the AI-empowered patient is them.
For any listeners who want detailed information, they go to my website, robertpearlmd.com, where they have that information sitting in play. But I have to set a background for you, Cam, which is to understand the evolution that's about to happen in artificial intelligence. And for your listeners who know a lot about business and other aspects of their work, they may not have as much detail about AI, and they might say, Dr. Pearl, I've heard this before. I've heard AI is going to change everything, and not much is very different. So why am I so bullish about generative AI? I'll use the word chat GPT, although there's also products from Google and from Microsoft that are equivalent and similar in design and architecture. The original AI was simply rules-based. Programmers would put in what's called algorithms that the machine would follow. And by definition, the AI could never be any smarter than the people who programmed it, because it was using the so-called heuristics, rules of thumb, to be able to come up with answers. The second generation that's often confused with what exists today is what I call narrow AI. It would take 10,000 mammograms, 5,000 of which showed cancer, 5,000 of which didn't. It would have the AI technology using neural networks and deep learning, comparing the two and coming up with variations, 50, 100 of them, putting a probability factor and being able to say whether a particular study showed cancer or not. There are some applications for this, but very little is being done because these are directed at the clinician. And the clinician often doesn't want to give up that power and control to a technology.
Yep.
The new generation, ChatGPT, generative AI, is completely different. It's preloaded with a massive amount of information, the entire internet, medical textbooks, articles, material from conferences. And then it's given a variety of rules, but these are just parameters to be able to analyze data and come up with conclusions. And the big difference is now this creates not just knowledge, but expertise. And this is what's going to be different. Not the current generation, Cam. The current generation, I'll say, is a toy, 1 or 2%. But the technology is improving, doubling in power every year. 5 years from now, 30 times more powerful. 10 years, 1,000 times more powerful. And that is what I am talking about by the empowered clinician. Now you can take all of your data, put all of your information in place, take laboratory information that you might have access to, your genetic information, your family history, your medications, things coming off your monitors from home, put it into the system, plug it in, it's called. As a result of that, you can now make your own diagnoses. You can come up with your own treatment plans. You can become clinically as expert as the physician. And that shifts that doctor-patient relationship. It's no longer hierarchical. It's not the doctor having all the knowledge and the patient having to come there looking for this as you might go to get information from some guru at the top of a mountain. This is two people working together. And what I would say to your listeners is you're going to have to be active in this process. You're going to have to recognize what it can do. You're going to have to learn from what is possible, knowing that knowledge, and bring that to the office. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the Khan Academy in San Jose area, KHAN. This is an organization that flips. Rather than going to a lecture at a university to learn information, you actually learn it at home using technology. And then you go to class to figure out how to apply it. And that is why I think it's going to be the empowered patient. It's going to change the doctor-patient relationship. And I actually think it can reverse the slide in American longevity and American health and disease.
So the doctors can't be excited for this, Dr. Pearl, when suddenly everybody on the street is just as big of an expert as they are. They've got the role in the community of shaman, of healer. They've always been given a special respect in the community, and now anybody with access to a cell phone is going to be as expert as they are. What is the doctor's predicted reaction?
I concur with you that initially physicians are going to be concerned. And they can be concerned because they're used to patients coming with Dr. Google and a lot of information coming off of the internet and being provided by institutions that want to use that to access patients and generate revenue. What they're going to discover is this is very different. There's going to be a role for doctors. It's not going to replace physicians. It's going to change physicians. The Khan Academy didn't eliminate teachers. It actually elevated the role, the implementation of a ATM, didn't eliminate the need for bankers. These are all opportunities to use technology to do the things that can be generalized. Now, you're absolutely right. In physicians' mind, what today makes them so special is their ability to diagnose and make recommendations. Right. Now they have the opportunity to actually advance the care. Why are doctors so burned out today? 60% of physicians are burned out today. Why? Because they can't do a great job. They're on a treadmill that's running ever faster, having to see patients every 10 or 12 minutes. This is just not possible. when the patient comes who's empowered, who has expertise, and is now coming for the physician to make that added value that only can come from the human to human, that actually doctors trained for 10 years to be able now to provide that added level, and the results are better, that is going to be fulfilling, I believe, for doctors once it sits in place.
Let's come back to this after the break, Dr. Pearl. I'm very excited about this as a guy who tries to take the leadership in my own health to think that I could have a greater role in it. Like I said, I try to be very active in my own health monitoring, and there are long stories behind that. But let's pick this up after break. There's so much more to get into. Before we go to break, folks, I want to remind you about this podcast that I'm a big fan of by First Horizon Bank called Bucket Listening. It's targeted to the CEOs, the leadership in the organization who have asked the question, why wait till the end to target my bucket list? Why don't I do it now? And why don't I do it through my business? First Horizon has created it. You can find on your favorite podcast site. Again, it's called Bucket Listening. I encourage you to take a listen and hear how these people have targeted their life goals as a part of their work. We'll be right back with Dr. Robert Pearl with more insight of what we can expect on our own health. Be right back. Customer service never goes out of style. In fact, I think it's safe to say that customer service is more valuable and more important now more than ever. Hi, this is Cam Marston. One thing that my over 200 episodes of What's Working has taught me is how important customer service is to building and maintaining a thriving business. It's the growing need for customer service that's led me to partner with one of the state's leading customer service trainers to create our program called Delivering 5-Star Customer Service. Your team will get one 90-minute training session per month for 6 consecutive months. Each session builds on the skills learned the previous month, allowing your customer-facing teams to practice before moving on to the next lesson. And the 6 lessons address everything from appearance to electronic communications to conflict resolution to maintaining a service mindset. Our program travels and is delivered in person at your workplace, nothing virtual. You simply can't practice the level of the skills this course teaches virtually. For more information, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's schedule a time to talk. Remember, you have less to fear from outside competition than you do from discourtesy and bad service from inside your own company. Again, email me, cam@cammarston.com, and let's talk about your business. Dr. Robert Pearl's on the other side of a Zoom call for me. He's in Northern California teaching at Stanford this week, and undoubtedly the highlight of his week and the most intellectual stimulation he'll have is this radio show with me in South Alabama. Dr. Pearl, the notes for your book that's called Uncaring, How the Culture of Medicine Kills Doctors and Patients, it has this sentence that would seem to contrast a little bit on what we're talking about, which is this: today's physicians have a surprising disdain for technology, an unhealthy obsession with status, and an increasingly complicated relationship with their patients. AI will change that?
As you say in that book, I talk about the culture of medicine, one that can be followed back for hundreds and thousands of years. By the way, for listeners, all profits from that book go to Doctors Without Borders, which is a wonderful organization doing relief work around the globe. No, this is going to be the challenge, which is that in order for the technology to have the impact that it could have, both doctors and patients are going to need to make changes and shifts in the relationship that they have today. Having said that, I don't think physicians are going to have much choice, because now you're going to have an empowered patient who, if that individual can't get the kind of relationship they want with their current doctor or current health system, they'll be able to get it someplace else. But as I made the point before the break, that because the impact is actually going to be positive, I believe, for the physician, it's going to create time. It's going to allow them to go into greater depth. I mean, we know that today there's over 400,000 misdiagnoses that happen. It's not for lack of knowledge, it's from lack of time. And as a clinician, I will tell you listeners, there's nothing worse than when something goes bad for a patient. Doctors are very caring. They are well trained. But when you make someone move too fast, when you cut the time that's needed to provide that care, that's when mistakes happen. And so I think that over time it will evolve, as by the way it has in nearly every other industry.
How will medical school need to change?
Medical school needs to change radically. It's already a generation behind. I mean, what doctors do, let me even back up before that. How doctors are chosen is based upon their ability to memorize. They're given these very rigorous tests. They're based upon 10,000 arcane facts from around the world, many of which they'll never, ever use again. And then in class, they're taught more facts to memorize. They carry in their pocket a tool that is so much more powerful than the entire information technology, the technological systems that we use to launch rockets to the moon. It's called the cell phone. You can find in a matter of seconds information that would have required a trip to the library, that would require a backpack filled with 50 pounds of textbooks. It's sitting in the doctor's pocket. And how many medical schools today teach physicians to start with the cell phone? They ban the cell phone from tests. They should require doctors to bring the cell phone, to use the cell phone and apply it. We are at level 1 and we should be at level 3 or 4 or 5. And now we're going to have a tool that is 10 or 100 times more powerful than that cell phone. They need to start building it into the curriculum. But I will say that unlike with the cell phone and even with the internet, actually medical schools are paying attention to this, as is everyone in a graduate education, because there's no way to avoid it. This is the tool people will be using. And so what they should be doing is training physicians. How should you use this application to get information? And maybe more importantly, how should you use this tool to help your patients, to help themselves become healthier? Lifestyle medicine. We know that we can improve health through exercise and diet. There's a great article published today that showed that running is more effective at relieving anxiety and depression than medication.
Yeah.
And how often do doctors prescribe exercise? How often do they tell a patient to go to ChatGPT, to put in place the dietary restrictions related to their medical conditions, to get the application to create a shopping list and a recipe process to follow? This is the future. Imagine if we can eliminate diabetes by better nutrition and by exercise, better manage hypertension without medication and the complications. The potential applications are massive, and the time to start learning that is not at the end of your training, but at the beginning.
Can you hypothesize on how this may go through a business, an organization? So let's assume my job is to buy health plans for my employees. What is that going to look like?
Well, right now, you buy health care as though it's a commodity. You, for the most part, just look at what the price is going to be, and you try to find something that's going to be more affordable and yet acceptable to the people who you employ. And right now, you care a lot about your employees because there's a tight job market, so you want to keep them. And if they get sick, you pay a lot more as a purchaser of healthcare. Imagine shifting. So now you're going to pay not based upon some policy, but it's based upon the health outcomes. You're going to pay based upon how much improvement occurs. And you're going to want to document it not just by some metric, some laboratory result, but you're going to want to see fewer heart attacks, fewer strokes, less cancer. And the organization that can accept the payment and deliver on those promises is the one you're going to want as an employer. And by the way, it's the one your employees are going to want as patients, because you'd much rather avoid a heart attack than have it well treated. You'd much rather avoid cancer than receive chemotherapy and get it cured. And I think it's going to require a shift in what the businesses do, particularly the self-funded ones. And I'm going to make a point to your listeners. And I was the CEO in Kaiser Permanente, so I know this well. I think the decisions around healthcare and healthcare policy, healthcare purchasing are ones that should be made by the CEO, not the CFO.
Oh, interesting.
The CEO, understanding what the business is trying to do, how healthier employees can make a difference, who can understand the cost of employee turnover. Healthcare needs to be one of the top priorities as a business imperative. It is also a health imperative, but a business imperative. And ultimately, I see the CEO as being accountable for the overall health of the business. And to accomplish that, the health of the people who provide or do the service that the business sells.
So the CFO is typically regarded as the one who negotiates the price of this thing, trying to find the best bang for the buck, et cetera. You're suggesting that the health plan become a strategic initiative championed by the CEO.
Absolutely. I mean, with the CFO, don't make any doubt about that. You got to do the analysis of the data, and you have to create the alternatives. But when you're talking about major strategy, and I believe that an organization only has 3 or 4, maybe 5 that the CEO can manage, that healthcare and health needs to move into that arena. Across the United States today, it's 20% of the GDP. That's a fifth of the nation's production, the fifth of the nation's utilization. I think that is high enough to be a CEO type process, and it's not driven solely by the price of that service. It's an important piece, but it's the value created against that price. And I think that we've underappreciated, underestimated the impact on that value, both the actual value and the perceived value, the impact it can have on employees and employee retention, the impact it can have on health, and the way it can actually reduce the cost without compromising individual income.
Dr. Pearl, this is very engaging. We're going to go to break again. And when we come back from break, I want to talk to you about the change that you pushed through with MapMG. And this is folks, we're speaking to a physician here who has the rare talent of also being a very savvy businessman and pushed some change management through an organization. And I was with that organization, and it was very evident that it had worked, And I know a lot of organizations out there are going through change. I want to get your recipe, your prescription, if you will, for that. We'll be right back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston, on the line with Dr. Robert Pearl.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence, but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit, with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. I'm Cam Marston. You're listening to What's Working. Dr. Robert Pearl is on the other side of a Zoom call with me. He's been named one of modern healthcare's 50 most influential physician leaders. He's an advocate for the power of integrated, prepaid, technologically advanced, and physician-led healthcare delivery. As we're speaking, he's teaching this week a couple of classes at Stanford University, and I'm just flattered and delighted to have him on the phone. Dr. Pearl, MapMG, the Mid-Atlantic Permanente Group, went through some extraordinary change, which you led to get it to where it is. After you finished that speech that I was at in Baltimore, I think you'd shuffled on down the road, and they said, listen, Cam, what you see here, this organization, these people in this room, has been created by that man there. Talk to me about the state of the organization when you first entered, your read on it is today, and for my listeners, what it took to push through a new culture and a lot of change.
As you point out, the Mid-Atlantic Permanente Medical Group, Kaiser Permanente, in the Mid-Atlantic region, this is Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland, was in big trouble. It was losing members. It was struggling with financial challenges. It had 10% short the number of physicians that were needed because it couldn't recruit effectively. Quality was lagging. There's a whole set of problems. And I believe whether you're in business or in medicine, the first thing is to make a diagnosis. What's wrong? What's going wrong? And it was clear to me when I talked to the doctors who were there, who were excellent doctors, well-trained, highly motivated, that the problem was that and I will use the word the health plan, I don't mean a particular individual, saw the marketplace as being solely driven by price comparison. And they said, oh, we can buy something 10% cheaper, 20% cheaper on the outside than the inside. And you could say from a financial perspective, that sounds logical. But in medicine, it doesn't work that way. And I'm a big believer in what's called systemness. It's the synergies. It's the exponentially greater power when things work well together. Collaboration and coordination across doctors, the opportunity to apply technology in ways that reduce care. Now you're going to say, why don't doctors want to reduce care? But remember, in a fee-for-service world, and I suspect that's the situation you're facing right now in the consultation you're doing, you make more money when you do more. Whether it adds value or not, we don't pay for that. Whether it makes people live longer or not, we still get paid exactly the same. And you're a savvy businessman, and I teach in the business school. Tell me your incentives, and I'll tell you the outcome you're going to get.
Yeah, interesting.
Pay people to do more, you're going to get more. Pay people to do better, and you're going to get better. And that was the big observation that I made. So the health plan was worried that if we try to internalize care, patients are going to leave. Patients are going to perceive the care is not as good if they have less choice. And it came out exactly the opposite. We moved access down so that the over 70% was same day or next day. They couldn't get that in the community around them. Quality went from being good to being number one out of 1,000 programs across the U.S., which it still is today. There's only 3 programs given the highest ranking, and it's one of the 3 in the entire nation, not just in the region, the entire nation. We offered physicians the opportunity to work collaboratively with colleagues, and all of a sudden we had 10 applicants for every opening. What was so interesting to me, Cam, is that by achieving systemness, quality went up, access became easier, satisfaction of both providers and receivers increased, and cost came down. And what we've seen since then is a 250% increase in membership and a very thriving organization. Actually, it was not as hard as you might think to do it in the Mid-Atlantic because the physicians were excellent individuals who could see what was happening. They were concerned because no one had implemented this kind of coordinated system of care with payment being received based upon value created rather than being solely based upon volume generated. And that was my job. And I'd go around and I'd talk to people and I'd hold big meetings and I'd take the questions. And I would, most importantly, and this is for leaders everywhere, understand other people's fear. As leaders, we think of ourselves as being courageous, and we fail to recognize that we too have fears and concerns when someone else has control that could impact our families and our lives and our personal health. And being able to take those one at a time. I'm afraid that if I see patients same day or next day, I'll never get to go home at night.
Yeah.
No, patients need the care. Whether you do it today or a week from now, it's actually easier today because a week from now, they're going to be sicker than they are right now. If I give patients too much information or control, they'll just be in my office all day asking questions. No, they ask questions so they don't have that information. Give it to them, particularly in advance, or find a way to make them better educated. I go on the whole list of approaches. In the end, what they could understand is that this was a way to get them the success that they deserved as excellent clinicians. And then at some point, another notion that I know you tell people about: no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. No one will follow you until they trust you and believe in you. And that was truly what I felt. I wanted them to be successful. This was not about me. I didn't have any stock. I didn't have any way that I was going to financially benefit as a result of that. I could see the power, the commitment, and I wanted to help them achieve that. And when they could feel that, they were willing to take the risk. Taking risk is hard.
Yeah.
And I want to applaud them for that courage and that heroism.
How long did it take before you sensed that this was going to work? You saw it in your head that it would work. It made sense in the way you observed things that it would work. But when did you finally get the feeling that, I think they're buying into this? How long did it take?
You have to actually go back to when I first became the CEO in Kaiser Permanente. And this was now the head of the Permanente Medical Group, which was in California, which had just lost a lot of money. And the Kaiser Permanente was down to 2 days of cash. And as you know, regulators require 3 days of cash to stay in business. The organization had to borrow a day of cash. It had very similar problems for the same kinds of reasons. And I had already seen it succeed in California. Now, in California, it probably took 5 years to move from, as you say, the vision in my head to the reality on the ground. But having already done it once, the second time, it was so much faster. And I would say that within 2 or at most 3 years, I was totally confident that we would be successful. We had stopped the slide. We had started the growth. All the metrics were turning around. And certainly by now, which is about 7 or 8 years, the success is undeniable.
One of the things that I tell my clients is that you've got to repeat the story. You got to repeat the vision over and over and over again. You'll get tired of hearing yourself say it. Is that something you had to do?
I love that. The way I say it is, it takes 17 times to learn a word in a foreign language. A new vision is a foreign word. It takes 17 repetitions before people will fully understand it, before they can ask all the right questions to understand what intuitively they have and be able to get reassured and confident.
Dr. Pearl, people out there are going to want to know where you are, who you are, what you do. Tell them where they can find you.
The easiest place is my website, robertpearlmd.com. I write for Forbes 2 or 3 times a month. I have a weekly podcast called Fixing Healthcare, and they can reach me through any of those tools and mechanisms, and I would love to be able to help anyone who finds himself in the same situation. I believe that together we can once again make American healthcare the best in the world. And that's my passion and my commitment to do so. And I appreciate, Cam, the work that you're doing, helping to advance understanding, knowledge, and to accelerate the process going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Pearl. It's been an honor to have you on the show. We'll be right back after this break with segment 5 and a recap. You're listening to What's Working.
Is paying a real estate agent worth the money? I'm Angelo DiPaola, the Coastal Connection with eXp Realty. Great real estate agents are like the best doctors. They listen deeply, Make your goals their own, stay current on trends that impact your decisions, and have experience navigating unexpected situations. We help our clients make the best real estate decisions along the Gulf Coast. Google me, Angelo Di Paola, The Coastal Connection.
And there you go, Dr. Robert Pearl. I'll have all his contact information in the show notes if you want to check him out. For those of you who are wondering if they could get that email or that website again, as you probably know, this radio show is also converted into a podcast, and you can find that podcast at whatsworkingcam.com. And in that podcast notes, you'll find the links to Dr. Pearl, his books. He's got 2 books. The first one called Mistreated. I mentioned this during the show. Mistreated, Why We Think We're Getting Good Health Care and Why We're Usually Wrong. And another one called Uncaring, How the Culture of Medicine Kills Doctors and Patients. Dr. Pearl told me before the call, before we started recording, that he's on his way to the Philippines over the holidays to do surgery on cleft palates there. So he's a practicing physician. He is a leader of healthcare organizations. He's a professor at Stanford, teaching a couple of different classes there. As you can tell, he's a guy with a lot of time on his hands and not much to do. Actually, an extraordinary individual. And like I said, when I saw him present in Baltimore, I thought, my goodness, this man should be on the show. Let's talk about what the future of healthcare looks like. It's very interesting. And those of you who have played with GPT, I ask my seminar audiences from time to time, how many of you have played with this chat GPT stuff yet? And about half the hands go up. If you haven't, I'm going to encourage you to do so and get a sense of the significance of this. And I've just used it for little lollipop things thus far. And I'll give you an example. This was back in February. My wife and I had a Valentine's Day date. And I said, I wonder what this stuff can do. And oh, by the way, it's Valentine's Day date tonight. And I asked it to write a poem to my wife. And I gave it the structure, something I remember learning in high school called a Shakespearean sonnet. And if you ask me what one is right now, I don't know what it is. I just know it exists. But I asked this technology, write me a poem, a Shakespearean sonnet to my wife named Lisa on this Valentine's Day. And I hit enter. And I expected, some crunching and grinding and, maybe 5 minutes later it would give me something. 10 minutes later, even 20 minutes would have been a miracle. About 15 seconds, maybe even less. And it was really well done. And I read this thing and I thought, oh my gosh, if it can do this in that amount of time, what else can it do? Well, apparently it's going to change healthcare. And that's not easy to say. We've always, healthcare, the conversation is healthcare has been, how do we get the patient more involved in their own health? And when we have to go through the hassle of the waiting rooms and the time and et cetera to go to the doctor, whereas now in our pocket, each of our pocket is a device that is only growing faster and faster, more comprehensive with information that can help each of us in our own healthcare. It's phenomenal, man. It's just phenomenal. Let's hope we take advantage of it. You and me. Let's hope each of us take advantage of it. That'll wrap us up for this week. I want to thank Dr. Pearl again for coming on the show. Would love to have him back at some point. Find me on social media. You can find me on all the normal social media outlets. My favorite is Facebook and LinkedIn. That's where I usually put the most. Reach out to me, Cam, C-A-M, at cammarston.com. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you got a story in mind. Show continues to grow. You're probably tired of hearing that, but show continues to grow. New markets all the time. And can't wait to see what happens. We'll be back next week. Have a good week, everybody. As you likely know, this show originates as a radio show broadcast across the state of Alabama, and it continues to grow in both radio listeners and market. After it's formatted for radio, we then turn it into this podcast. Please share it with those you think would find it interesting, and subscribe to the podcast on my YouTube page where you can leave messages and your thoughts and your comments, and I'll certainly get back in touch. Finally, if you're a fan of the show, please offer a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can find my book called What Works on Amazon.com. In it, I highlight the top 10 ideas from the first 200 episodes of the show. Mind you, they're not the top 10 best episodes, they're the top 10 best ideas. Many times the same ideas are brought up again and again by different guests, and we dig into those ideas in such a way that they'll be easily applicable for your business. Simply go to Amazon and enter my name, and you'll find What Works as well as my other books. Chapter titles include How to Find a Niche, Innovation, Building Teams, and so forth. To learn more about the workshops and seminars I offer, go to cammarston.com. There you can view clips of my work, view workshop titles, view my reviews, case studies, customer lists. It's all there. If you'd like a free copy of one of the chapters of my book, enter your email address at the bottom of the homepage at cammarston.com. And from that site, you can email me directly. I always love to hear from you. You'll also find me on social media. Find Cam Marston on all the social media platforms, and you may need to enter the numeral 1. There's one other Cam Marston out there, and that numeral 1 distinguishes me from him from time to time. So if you're unsure if it's me or not, enter that numeral 1 after my name, and it should do the trick. On a more personal and less professional side, I record weekly commentaries that air across Alabama on Alabama Public Radio twice each day on Fridays called Keeping It Real. They've won statewide and national awards. They're simple observations on the world as it goes on around me, and they're only a few minutes long. They're a passion. You can find them on the same podcast app you're using to listen to this. Finally, if you're interested in advertising on this podcast or the radio show, reach out. I've worked hard to cultivate a specific listener, and I can tell you all about them, and I have many different options for helping you reach them. Thanks again for listening. We'll have another episode available soon.